Hey guys, what's up? This is Marco from Nerd Boys Comic Blog, and today I'm doing a Comics Overhaul episode on two different issues, the first being Mr. Miracle #1 and the second Dark Knight's Metal #1. Usually I like doing podcast discussion videos on these Comics Overhaul episodes, but since I'm the only one who actually read both of these issues, I'm going to be the only one talking about them. We're going to start off with Mr. Miracle #1, and if you don't know much about Mr. Miracle, he's actually the adopted son of Darkseid, and the biological son of Highfather. His real name is Scott Free, and as a baby, Scott was traded to Darkseid for Orion, in a truce between New Genesis and Apocalypse. So Scott was raised on Apocalypse and totally discarded by Darkseid and just given to Granny Goodness, and he was tortured for most of his life, and he spent most of his life becoming an escape artist to escape the treachery of Apocalypse. And that made him really good at it. Now eventually Scott would escape Apocalypse with his wife Big Barda, and they would come to Earth and join the Justice League in their fight against Darkseid. But you can never really outrun your past, can you? And that's one of the themes of the book. The theme of outrunning your past, escaping your past, and escaping death, because the issue opens up with Scott laying on the bathroom floor with his wrist slit open, and he's rushed to the hospital and wakes up to find his wife, Barda, right next to him, and he has to deal with the dramas and the aftermath of an attempted suicide. Throughout the issue, you could see how deeply this has affected both Scott and Barda. I've heard a lot of people say this comic deals with suicide in a very real kind of way, and I have to agree with that. The artwork by, I'm gonna butcher this, but Mitch Gerads is so visceral, yet clean at the same time. The art reminds me a little bit of Sorrento's art from Secret Empire, but a lot cleaner, and it looks a lot better too, and the coloring has a lot to do with that. The coloring and the dot effects in the issue give it kind of like this surreal aspect to it, and it's also kind of leading me to believe that this might be an unreliable narrator, that Mr. Miracle might still be going through his battle for his own life, since he did try to commit suicide, and we do see him wake up in the hospital, but is that real? Has that already happened? Is he in limbo currently fighting for his life? Because there are a few things that make you question the reality of what's going on. Oberon is at one point talking to Mr. Miracle. Highfather's talking to Mr. Miracle, and it kind of gives this effect of a dream. And Big Bart even says Oberon's been dead, and Mr. Miracle might be losing his mind, or he might still be in the hospital currently facing certain doom and certain death and escaping from that death. Because that's one of the things I liked about this issue, the whole not knowing what's real, not knowing what's going on. There's a mystery to it. And Tom King, the writer, who a lot of people know for his work on The Vision, and he's currently working on Batman for DC Rebirth, I could see a lot of comparisons that people are going to immediately draw to The Vision because, one, Mr. Miracle and The Vision do look a lot alike in both color scheme and design, and they're both Jack Kirby creations. And I could see a lot of parallels between this and The Vision with Mr. Miracle's pseudo family, with him, Big Barda, Oberon, Orion, Darkseid, and Highfather. This family might be crumbling down a lot like how the Vision's family had crumbled in Tom King's miniseries. And you could tell this is going to be one of those Tom King stories people are going to be talking about for a long time. I know Marvel's been pushing the Vision from All New All Different Marvel because it was one of the best All New All Different Marvel story arcs. It's being pushed in the trade paperbacks. There's a new director's cut that's coming out constantly. I see that all over the shelves right now, and it's on a bunch of people's recommended lists right now. I think The Vision is going to overshadow that. This is going to be one of those books that you can recommend to your casual graphic novel reader friend, and this is going to be one of the books that people are going to dissect for a while. It's going to be like Watchmen, where it even has a 9-panel layout like Watchmen, where people are going to look at it and decipher new things or find new things with every read through of the book. Everything's going to just be dropping clues and hints, and that's another thing Tom King is really good at. It's dropping hints for future storylines. And since this is only going to be a 12-issue run, a 12-issue series, I think Tom King and artist Mitch Gerads, or Gardaz, I don't know. They're going to be crafting a really great story together. If they're in the offices working side by side together, they can craft something as great as Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons had worked on back in 1985. This is going to be one of those things that comic historians are going to point at and be like, hey, Mr. Miracle 2017 was a great run in a time where there weren't that many great runs for comics right now, because right now we're kind of in a dry spot. It's maybe Marvel and DC have one great book a week and everything else is kind of meh to mediocre, but this and a few other books I can recommend, like my second book I'm going to talk about, Dark Knight's Metals. But before I move on to Dark Knight's Metal, I do want to say that I highly recommend Mr. Miracle #1, and you should definitely pick it up. Go pick up the single issue right now. If you're listening to this and issue 2 has already come out, good. Pick up both and you will not regret it. It's going to be one of those issues, one of those storylines you really want to get in on while it's still going on before everyone else has a trade paperback. Don't trade weight on this one. It's already just going to be one of 12 issues issues. It says right there on the top, get it while it's good. I mean, the cover has a freaking review quote on it. I don't even, how many comics do you know have a review quote on the front? I know it's kind of like obnoxious of DC to do that, but at the same time, it's like, wow, they're trying to make this a big deal, and it will probably be about as big a deal as anything that's going on this summer from DC until Doomsday Clock comes out. But anyway, speaking of big deals this summer, how about Dark Knight's Metal? Written by Scott Snyder with art by Greg Capullo. This is actually going to be the culmination of Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo's Batman. Started back during the New 52. They worked on 50 great issues of the series together, and now they're all kind of bringing it all together with Dark Knight's Metal. Just a little bit of a heads up, if you do not like Batman stories where Batman is the most important character in the entire universe, you're probably not going to like this one because, again, Batman is the center focus of this event. Also, if you're a new reader to comics, this probably isn't the best place to start reading. This is very continuity heavy, deals with a lot of Grant Morrison stuff from his run of Batman, and a lot of Scott Snyder Batman continuity, and a little bit of Grant Morrison's Multiversity, and a little bit of Neil Gaiman's Sandman at the very end of this issue, but we'll get into that later. The premise is basically this. Batman has been investigating nth metal. It's the metal that Hawkman and Hawkgirl use in their mace, their wings, and their gravity belts. And he finds out that nth metal is basically what almost binds the DC universe together, the DC mythos. It's what has allowed characters like Ra's al Ghul, Vandal Savage, the Wizard Shazam to live for so long, and has granted them multiple powers, and it's actually what allows metahumans to receive powers from accidents rather than just dying of cancer or being crushed to death or dying of severe burns. Now, it's a pretty neat little retcon to explain where and how metahumans came from, but there's also a reference to Dionysium, the element that brought back Batman and the Joker after the events of Endgame, and Dionysium is actually a derivative of nth metal. So now Batman has been directly affected by the nth metal, but then we find out that Bruce Wayne is actually descended from the Bat tribe, an ancient human tribe that has been feuding with the Bird tribe, another ancient human tribe. And this is where things get a little bit more convoluted, but also kind of building on the back of previously established mythos. So Batman is now going to supposedly be the vessel for some dark ancient thing that's coming over from the dark multiverse, where nth metal had originated from. Now you can just imagine the dark multiverse as like the Upside Down from Stranger Things, because that's pretty much what it is. Let's get into the issue itself. The issue opens up with the Justice League in a gladiatorial match set up by Mongol. Each one of the Justice Leaguers is wearing an armor that dampens their abilities. Superman has a red sun armor on, Flash has an armor that dampens his speed force, so on and so forth. And it's just pretty much a cool excuse to have the Justice League fighting in badass armor and eventually forming a Voltron robot to destroy the arena and fight Mongol. Kind of like an excuse to have a fun action sequence to open up the series or the event. But then we have the League returning to Earth and discovering a giant mountain protruding from Gotham City. And this mountain is, of course, somehow connected to the metal and the dark Batman who are going to come. Yeah, the main draw of this series is evil versions of Batman with all the Justice League's abilities. You have a version of Batman with a Speed Force. You have a Wonder Woman Batman, a Green Lantern Batman. You have all these crazy combinations of Batman and Justice Leaguers, and they're all evil, and they're all going to fight the Justice League. It's kind of the setup for the story. The main villains are going to be evil Batman. And you get a little bit more of backstory, because there are two previous issues, two preludes to this whole event called The Forge and The Casting, and they kind of further built upon the mystery. You could skip them if you want to. They're kind of interesting if you want to see what the New 52 Joker has been up to, and Duke and all those characters. If you're a Batman reader, you should probably check out The Forge and The Casting before you pick up Metal #1. Altogether, I think there are going to be 25 main title issues and tie-in issues to Metal. You have The Forge, The Casting, the Metal main series, and a few different tie-ins to different DC books and some spin-offs for the evil Batman characters, but you don't really need to read them if tie-ins are not your cup of tea. I'm definitely not going to read all the tie-ins. I'm just going to pick up the main title books, and whatever Batman spin-offs seem kind of interesting to me, like The Batman Who Laughs and Dawnbreaker. But other than that, you don't really need every tie-in. I definitely don't try to get every tie-in with every single event comic, because most of them are just pointless anyway. But yeah, like I said, if you are not heavy into DC continuity or Batman comics right now, you might want to avoid Metal for right now until we catch up. If you do want to read Metal anyway, go for it. I suggest it. It's a pretty interesting event. The premise is, anyway, just the idea of evil Batman, and of course Batman being the main focus again of another event. If you're tired of it, one of the most intriguing things about this event actually is the inclusion of Daniel Hall, aka Dream, aka the grandson of Carter Hall, the Golden Age Hawkman. For those of you who don't know, Daniel Hall was in the Sandman series written by Neil Gaiman, a series that I have never read before, but I've heard from so many people that it's a series I definitely need need to check out. Even non-comic book readers have been suggesting Sandman to me, like just casually in conversation, be like, hey, have you read Sandman? It's really good. So Sandman's one of those stories that has kind of transcended the medium of comics and gone on to be very mainstream, yet still kind of niche. It's a story that's struck a chord with people who don't read comics at all, and it's interesting that DC would bring up Sandman at a time like this, 20 years after the series had even ended. But I think with Metals, Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo are trying to pull in some deep cuts from the DC universe to try and end their tenure with Batman on like a pretty positive note. I say this is a good pick if you are a Batman fan, if you're a DC fan, if you read most of the New 52 Batman stories, you should probably pick this up. If you read All-Star Batman, this would be the next chapter in that series, and probably the conclusion. Maybe the conclusion. I'm not entirely sure if Snyder and Capullo intend to end on Metal, or if they want to continue for a few more story arcs, but it looks like it's going to be a good one. I mean, if you're going to bring in a deep cut like Sandman into the DC universe, we're already bringing in Watchmen. Why not just do the whole kit and caboodle? But yeah, I would recommend Metal to any DC or Batman fan. If you're out of the game, if you've been out of the game for a while, I'd say probably pick up some trades at the library, local library. If you want to catch up, or ask a friend if they have any trade paperbacks of the New 52 run, try and catch up on that before you get into Metals, or just talk to your local comic book guy. He could probably give you a quick rundown of everything that's going on, or you could check out some videos online from Comicstorian, Comics Explained. They do a great job of doing all that stuff, recapping and making a more digestible version. Yeah, but that's only if you're new to comics. If you've been keeping up with DC, this should be totally fine. It's pretty continuity heavy. It goes back to like some Grant Morrison stuff, some Neil Gaiman stuff, and definitely Snyder Capullo stuff. But hey, that's gonna be it for this episode of Comics Overhaul. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I really like both these issues. Not every episode of Comics Overhaul will be something I enjoy. I know coming up soon we're gonna do a whole recap of Secret Empire, which I'm not entirely sure how I feel about yet. I know we did the first 2 issues on Comics Overhaul. We're gonna do an entire recap when the Omega issue comes out, and I'm gonna talk to Charles or Damon about it, and we're gonna have a nice discussion about Secret Empire and how we all feel about it. And Generations, we might talk about Generations. I have zero interest in Generations besides maybe the Wolverine and Spider-Man issues. Other than that, I kind of think they're all pointless. They just seem to be lifting up the new characters, putting them on a pedestal compared to the older characters. I'm not really a fan of that, but I'll check out the Wolverine issue because I like Wolverine and X-23, and I'll check out the Spider-Man issue because I do like Peter Parker and Miles Morales. I want to see them team up again in something besides Spider-Man 2, which we can also talk about. I know Damon's keeping up with that, so when that series is over, I'll probably do a whole thing with Damon, recapping, reviewing, and discussing the whole series. But hey guys, if you listened to this whole thing all the way through and you did enjoy what you've been hearing, you can leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe. I'm Marco from Nerd Boys Comic Blog, and this has been Comics Overhaul. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.